Hey everyone, welcome to the Eli5 show by the Dapp List. Yeah, we started this series to explain how to use the projects that are launched through Buidl Launchpad. Yeah, so let's get started. We have Simon from Voltz. He will explain us how to use Voltz at the Eli5 session. Okay. Hi, Simon.
Hey,
Welcome at the ELFL session on the Dapp List. So, can you please introduce yourself a bit?
sure. So I'm Simon. I am the CEO and co-founder of Voltz Labs. Maybe just in terms of my background a little bit, so this is actually my third financial technology startup, using that in the broadest possible sense. So the first one honestly wasn't successful. The second one is now scaling very rapidly internationally, which is obviously great to see. And then this is the third. And all of those have been kind of really using bleeding edge technology to kind of build products and services that frankly try and transform the way that financial services work across the world. And that obviously brings us on to Voltz Labs, where we have built Voltz Protocol, which is an interest rate swap AMM. So I suspect you're about to ask me a few questions, so I might pause there just as an introduction.
Okay. Uh, yeah. So, Volts is a non-custodial automated market maker for interest rate swap, right? And I'm also sharing some useful links on Volts here so that community will know better about Volts, right? So I'm just sharing in the chat section. So guys, you can, yeah. So we are very excited to learn more about how to use Volts and should we start this session like a demo session on Volts?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, okay, great. So I am handing over to you.
Okay, perfect. So I think before this is actually the application that I'm showing right now, but before we even dive into this, I actually just want to take a step back. This is the website. I'm going to go to the resource center and just cover very briefly a few kind of high level concepts to help just kind of set the scene really in terms of the way that the protocol works so that when we're going through the app, it makes more sense to people. I'd encourage people to go through and read this if they kind of leave inspired and wanting to start trading rates. But this chart here really this explains. I'll just zoom in a little bit. This explains at the highest level the way in which the AMM works. So you have three different types of actors. You have liquidity providers that provide liquidity into the AMM that allows traders, which are both fixed takers and variable takers, they are traders, it allows them to start trading with that liquidity. And what a fixed taker does is they are effectively selling into the AMM a variable rate of return in exchange for a fixed rate. So if you think of this as, say, Uniswap, where you could be selling DAI and getting ETH back, it's kind of similar, except you're not doing DAI and ETH, you're doing rates. So you're selling a variable rate and receiving a fixed rate back. And the variable takers is like the same, but the exact opposite. So you, in this instance, you are effectively selling a fixed rate and receiving a variable rate back. And what this type of swap mechanic allows you to do is it allows you to take directional views on rates. So, for example, if we were to have a staked ETH rate of return and you to believe that would go up in the future, you may choose to be a variable taker because if the variable rate goes up, you're effectively buying that variable rate and selling a fixed. Or if you are kind of more risk averse, you may choose to take an asset that has a variable rate of return, such as CDAI, for example, and you can sell the variable rate of return associated with CDAI and receive a fixed rate back. at which point you've effectively converted CDI into a fixed rate asset. And I think it's helpful just to set the scene a little bit with those three actors. This article actually goes through a few examples in more detail, so it's definitely worth reading. But if we now go to the application, which is loading here, part of the reason why I wanted to set that scene is because you'll see at the top in the nav, there's two types of actors you can be. You can either be a trader or you can be a liquidity provider. And right now we're on the trading screen, so you can trade either fixed or variable rates. And what you can see here is you can see the different markets. So we have a market for ADI, AUSDC, so it's obviously AVE USDC, and then another market for CDI. And we'll add more markets over time with different assets such as ETH. And what you can see per kind of like market is each of them has a maturity. So that these pools like basically have a fixed duration, which at the beginning of the term was 60 days. Obviously, it's 35% of the way through at the moment. So this pool actually launched on the 1st of June and it will close on the 31st of July. But then alongside that, you can also see there's a variable rate of return within that pool and a fixed rate of return. And the fixed rate of return is driven off the AMM and trading activity. And the variable rate of return is actually pulled in using an on-chain rate oracle that we've built directly from Aave. So this is an ADI pool, and that 1.56% is the same variable rates that you'd get if you were to deposit a kind of DAI into Aave as a supplier. So you'd receive 1.56 back. And that just setting that scene, I think, is important because it helps explain why these variable rates are different and where the variable rates are coming from. And then obviously the fixed rates are also different because this is driven off trading activity. So as you get kind of more variable takers, that's going to drive up the fixed rate. And as you get more fixed takers, that's going to drive down the fixed rate as trading activity takes place. I'll jump into this in a little bit more detail, but before I do that, I just want to go to the LP screen. And what you'll see here is that there's some of this which is very similar. You have the ADI, AUSDC, CDI. You got all the same rates of return because it's the same market, same kind of pool maturity, because again, it's the same market. One thing you'll notice that's different is you have this 99.64% of the cap. And what that is we are currently in what we describe as an alpha launch state, where the cap, the amount of liquidity that can be provided as an LP is capped. So you'll see that in this banner here. And that's done for a whole bunch of reasons, just to kind of not least of all to help maintain the safety of the protocol at kind of the early stages of it, as we're starting to grow. But you'll see all of these have basically hit their caps, and these caps will increase over time until they're released completely, alongside the launching of new pools. But if we just go into one just to kind of see what happens and how you act as an LP. So as an LP, it works similar to Uniswap v3, where you choose a range or ranges, a lower range and an upper range, within which you deposit liquidity. And this is based on the fixed rate of return. So it's where you expect the kind of the majority of the trading volume to take place. So for example, I may say my lower bound is 1%. And I may say my upper bound is 2%. One of the things you'll see is this automatically converted to 2.006. That's simply for gas reasons. So there's a way in which the ticks are spaced, and it has like finite spacing, which basically just helps make the protocol more gas efficient. But now I've chosen my lower range and my upper range, 1%, 2%. Basically where I make the most money is if the fixed rate of return, and therefore the majority of the trading activity, takes place between those ranges. That means I'm constantly picking up fees as a liquidity provider. And what I can now do, and this is one of the things that's so brilliant about Voltz protocol, is I define the amount of notional that I wish to deposit into the AMM. But I can actually do that with leverage. So what you'll see it pops up here is the minimum amount of margin I need to deposit in order to create that much notional. And actually that's only 10 USDC. So in order to create a kind of 1,000 worth of notional, I actually only need to deposit 10. Well, actually it's 10.35, which is why it's kind of jumping out at me. If I make that 11, it's going to be enough because it's higher than the minimum. So I only need to deposit 11 of USDC in order to create that 1,000. And I actually generate and collect fees off the 1,000, which is really interesting. I'll come back to, well, in fact, actually, let's go through this now. So imagine I've pressed provide liquidity. What will then happen is you'll go to a portfolio page where you can see these are all ones which I've done in the past. You can see I've deposited 1,500 of DAI as margin, but actually that creates kind of fee notional, and I'm collecting fees on the 50,000. And another good example of that is, say, if I look at the AUSDC pool, I'm collecting fees on this 750,000 of liquidity, but actually I've only deposited around 9.5 of actual margin. So I'm generating my fees off this, but I've only deposited this. So I'm generating fees on leverage, which is really interesting. And there you can see my upper and lower bounds. And what we also have within here is you've got some data that shows you the current fixed rate is within that band, which is why it's green. If it were to move close to that band, which would then mean my liquidity was not collecting fees, it would go yellow. And if it were to move outside, it would go red to show that I'm no longer collecting fees. Now, if we go back to the trading pools, so imagine I want to act as a trader in the AUSDC pool. So if I click on that, what I can now see is I can see the ability to either be a fixed taker or a variable taker. If I am a fixed taker, we actually have a really nice feature where you can choose not to trade with leverage. Which means that instead of depositing USDC, you'd actually be depositing AUSDC in this instance. But imagine I'm going to trade with leverage, and actually I choose to be a variable taker in this instance, which means I expect the variable rate to increase over time. So I'm selling the fixed rate and buying the variable. And again, what I can do here is if I were to decide I'm going to do 1,000 of that kind of notional. Actually, I've already got margin in a position that I've done before. So it's telling me that I wouldn't, in this instance, I wouldn't actually need to deposit any new margin. So I could put that as 0 because I already have a position, which is perhaps not best for a demo purpose. But what you would then see is if you didn't have margin in here already, you would see the minimum margin requirement pop up. And you have this nice slider, which helps you work out kind of exactly how much margin you need to be taking in order to take like a safe amount of leverage. And what I do at this point, again, is I click trade, but given I've done some before, if I just go to the portfolio page. So again, you can see that I've got a large position in terms of notional, but only had to put in a small amount of margin in order to create those positions. And you can start going through and seeing, okay, again, this is the AUSDC kind of position that I made earlier. This is the C DAI position that I also made earlier. And this is the A DAI position that I've also done before too. And what's interesting is because you're trading with leverage, there's a kind of your margin. You need to make sure that your margin stays within a safe band. For example, if you're receiving less than you're paying, your margin will be decreasing over time. If it were to start to enter the liquidation zone, it would kind of show up as a warning signal before that, and then it would show up as being in danger of being liquidated, where a liquidator bot could come in and liquidate your position. Alongside this, what you can see is that I'm generating kind of income per pool, and the actual net rate that I'm receiving, because I've just done this big position, is now actually lower than the net rate that I am receiving, paying. but that's because I'm expecting this to go up over time. And that is essentially how you execute individual trades, like a variable take a trade or a fixed take a trade. But what I want to do is I want to actually take you to like a type of strategy that we put together to help show how you can use kind of either fixed or variable positions in order to generate a pretty substantial APYs. And this is a strategy that we kind of shared with everybody to help explain the power of Voltz protocol and what is so significant about trading or the ability to trade rates with leverage. And we walked this through, and just to kind of very briefly talk to it, the first point, which is really important, is it's actually not the rates, the numbers themselves that matter, because you're trading the rates with leverage. Instead, what actually matters is how the rates behave relative to one another for this particular strategy. So what we've done here is we've done some correlation analysis between ADI, CDI, and AUSDC. And what you'll see here is actually at C and kind of compound or CDI, you'll see that that is heavily correlated in terms of the rate over time. So what that basically means is it means that if the rates ever converge, we can kind of reasonably predict that they will converge again in the future. And actually, kind of the point that we make here is that it's actually pretty logical. If the rate of USDC is higher than CDI, people will start to move assets from kind of compound into AVE and move them as well from DAI to USDC to get a higher rate of return on their stable coins. So you can reasonably believe that when they diverge, they will converge again in the future. And what that enables you to do as you start getting kind of more sophisticated around rates trading is it enables you to build a bunch of signals where if kind of AVE is, or AUSDC rather, is kind of higher than CDI, what you'd do is you'd look to short AUSDC because you believe it's going to come down and be kind of comparable to CDI in the future. And you'd, at the same time, you'd long CDI. And what that means at a practical level is it means that in this instance, if you're going short on AUSDC, you would be selling the variable rate and buying the fixed. And in this instance, for CDI, what you'd be doing is you'd be buying the variable rate and selling the fixed. So if you think about those screens, those trading screens we had earlier, that's what you'd be doing for those two pairs. And this analysis, what we show here is that actually by doing this over a period of time, you can start to collect pretty substantial kind of returns. So in this instance with 5x leverage, which is way less than what I've been putting in on those examples I showed you, you can actually generate over a period of time around 100% cumulative return. And for anybody listening that is a trader, actually, when we start thinking about this in terms of Sharpe ratios, we've done some analysis to show that this type of statistical arbitrage on rates can generate pretty kind of significant or kind of create pretty significant Sharpe ratios over time too. So this is obviously quite sophisticated, but it shows you the power of being able to trade kind of rates with leverage, which you have not been able to do until Voltz protocol launched. And that is exactly, so if you were to go into here, that is exactly how you do it by either trading fixed or variable rates. And that is the end of the demo.
Great, Simon. Thank you for your presentation and sharing the thoughts on Voltz. Thank you so much. If anyone has question, please raise your hand. I will give you access to talk, or you can paste your question here in the chat box. Yes, Nebig, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, hi Simon, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Awesome, I'm good as well. I've just got one quick question, right? Let's say if I've got just wanted to understand, right? Let's say I have a position, I've already provided liquidity on compound, and I have CDI with me. Okay. And let's say if I want to go to the trader pools and give basically CDI, will that work? Or would it require DAI specifically?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if I go back to the trading screens, if I just share this, so what you can do if I go to the CDI pool, I can act as a fixed taker. So I'm selling a variable rate and receiving a fixed back. And if I click no leverage, then what I actually do at this instance is I am depositing this. Sorry, this is actually a small bug. What I'm doing in this instance is I'm actually depositing CDI rather than DAI. And that is how I then kind of used my CDI in what we describe as a fully collateralized position.
Got it. Because of that DAI in that box, right? I was a little confused. And also, yeah, that one. And also, like, if let's say I want to do trade with leverage, how does it work in that case? Because it's if let's say I know how much CDI I hold, right? So if I can simply insert, if I'm inserting a number over there, let's say 1,000. I'm not able to change the other factors. I'm not sure why. Okay, it's working.
So
yeah.
So if you're trading without leverage, you actually need DAI, not CDI, in order to. So you'd have to unwind it from compound, and then what you could do here is this is because I've already got a position, so it's telling me that I don't need to add any more margin. But imagine that wasn't the case. I'd be creating a notional amount that I want to trade. I then choose the amount of kind of margin that I want to deposit. This is now showing up as kind of like an extremely safe position because I already have margin in my account. That's why. If I didn't have this, then it'd be kind of showing different numbers here. If that makes sense.
Got it.
And then you can see that I've actually got 23 DAI in my kind of wallet, which is obviously not much, but it's now saying that I can trade. So what the issue you might be having is if you don't have any DAI in your wallet, you just got CDI, then it won't be letting you deposit CDI because you're doing a trade with leverage. But if you do a trade without leverage, then you would be able to do it. You would be able to. Yeah.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you.
You see this here saying minimum. Yep. This here is a bug, but this here is correct. Saying minimum required is in CDI.
Got it. Awesome. That's perfect. One more thing that I would like to understand is that during these times when the markets are uncertain, do you have any suggestions or recommendations for the people who would like to interact with Voltz? Because obviously the markets are, although the DAI is stable, right? But essentially, do these leverage positions have impact from the markets as well, or how does it work?
Yeah, no, so that's a really good question. And what's actually quite interesting when trading rates is they exhibit certain types of behavior, whether they are in a bull or a bear market. So there's one which I was talking before of this statistical arbitrage, where you expect CDI and ADI to have similar rates over time. Like that is true whether you're in a bull or bear market, which basically means if you kind of get over the learning curve of figuring out how you can trade rates, then actually you can continue to kind of have these models and continue to generate returns in both like a bull or bear. Because ultimately what matters is not, if you're doing something like statistical arbitrage, what matters is not the actual headline rate, it's how the rates behave relative to one another. And you can trade that exposure with leverage, which is pretty interesting.
You got it. Awesome. One more question. Sorry. Simon, would you guys be supporting other chains moving forward? Because a lot of people might want to play with leverage, but they might not want to, play with the gas fees, right? So something like Polygon or other chains for that matter.
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, it's not something which we're going to do immediately. So we plan on being on at kind of Ethereum to begin with, and we'll build out the ecosystem there first. But it is then something we'll look at after that, whether that be different chains or whether it actually just be kind of L2s. It is something which we'll look at in the future.
Got it. Awesome.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay then, Simon. Thank you so much for this insightful session on Voltz, and surely the community got to know more about Voltz through this session. So thank you, Simon. So thank you so much from the Dapp List team.
There's no problem. It's been great to talk to everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Thank you.